Committee for our afternoon hearings for February 23rd. We are live streaming, so I welcome the committee, guest speakers, and the public at large. We have 3, 6, 10 or 12 bills today. As those of you who follow us know, each bill is led by the sponsor. They start off, followed by witnesses in support, proponents, followed by question by the committee, followed by those favorable with amendments, followed by opponents, and then go back to questions. So lead witness for a proponent has up to 5 minutes. Other witnesses have up to 2.5 minutes. I will try to alert you if there is no opposition, so you may tailor your comments accordingly. With that, we're going to start with Senate Bill 449, Vice Chair Kagan, Public Information Act revisions, and the senator will start, followed by Ms. Snyder, Ms. Kirshner, Darren Wigfield, and Kyle Ross. And then we will later move to the favorable with amendments, Laura Anderson Wright, Christopher Kasich, and then go to the opponent. The only one listed for oral testimony is Jim Snyder. With that, Madam Vice Chair, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Just first, before I start, let me just indicate that there are significant amendments, and some of the folks who had signed up as unfavorable may end up revising the testimony. So I just want to give you a sense of that. I also want to give a shout out to Delegate Brooke Learman, my partner in all this, who has put a tremendous amount of efforts along with the advocates. So for the record, I'm Cheryl Kagan, very proud to be the senator for Gaithersburg and Rockville, and proud to be bringing another measure of government access and transparency through this bill this year. So the Maryland Public Information Act, as my colleagues probably know, but I'm just going to do a really quick overview for anyone watching. It enables members of the general public, the press, and others to have access to their government, to documents, to a PowerPoint, to access to minutes or materials that might not be available on a website. So there are basically 3 levels, 3 steps. So first, you can just ask the agency for a copy. The agency might give an unreasonable financial estimate, or they might give an unreasonable time estimate as to when you're going to get the materials. So people can then appeal. They go to the Ombudsman, and Lisa Kirshner, who's the Ombudsman, is with us today, so she can talk about her process. They recently, over the last year or so, they're looking at over 1,100 complaints. And so they try to do mediation and try to figure it out, working with the agency, working with the interested party to see whether there can be common ground, a more reasonable fee and a more reasonable turnaround time. If that doesn't work, it can go to the public meetings, the Public Information, Compliance Board. And we have Darren Wakefield here, who's a member of that board, and he'll give you a sense of what their process is. Bottom line is, they've had about 40 cases. So again, 1,100 and then only 40. So sort of what's happening there and why are so few being resolved? So one answer is because our ombudsman and team are doing a great job. The other problem is, though, that then the last option is going to court. And going to court, about 80% of the complainants don't do that because they have to pay the filing fee, pay court cases, hire a lawyer and all that. And even if your case is over $350, which is what brings it to the compliance board, you're talking about suddenly a big boost in cost, and that is not something that everybody's able to do. So how can we fix this process? Well, I think we've got to make sure that we've got more people on board with Lisa Kirshner as part of the Ombudsman's effort, and the Open Meetings Compliance Board has to I'm sorry, I keep doing that. The Public Information Compliance Board, I have worked a lot with both. The Public Information Compliance Board needs to be empowered, not just to send opinions, we really think you should charge less or should do it faster, but they need to actually be able to make decisions and have more clout than that. So, so this bill has been modified. The amendments will make it, frankly, a little more modest, but also a lot more acceptable to places like University System of Maryland and others. But it will increase transparency to government documents for the general public, for our press and others. So I'm happy to take questions, but I'm really delighted to have just the best witnesses. And so I'm really grateful to Rebecca Snyder at the DC Maryland Press Association. She's going to lead off, give us some idea of the importance of this public access for the press, for a free press in our democracy. And then we'll go, as I said, to Lisa Kirshner, the Ombudsman, and then to Darren Wakefield from the Compliance Board. With that, Mr. Chairman, I will defer to Ms. Snyder. Thank you all for your attention.
Ms. Snyder, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair Pinsky, and thank you, Senator Kagan, for that wonderful introduction. Members of the committee, I am, for the record, Rebecca Snyder, Executive Director of the Maryland, Delaware, DC Press Association, and we come before you today in support of Senate Bill 449. I want to take a step back and just talk a little bit about why the Public Information Act is so important. Maryland's Public Information Act was first enacted in 1970, and it grants the public a broad right of access to public records while protecting legitimate government interests and the privacy rights of individual citizens. So any record a government or public body creates, with certain exceptions, is accessible to the public. And the Public Information Act promises people and the press access to records with the least cost and least delay possible. So when it works well, it's a wonderful thing. It's an important tool of democratic governance. It tends to promote trust and confidence in state and local government by giving citizens the means to understand and monitor government agencies, and by informing people about issues that concern them. Now, people's interest in government information is a window into what's important to them, and it showcases the effect government has on people's lives. Now, there are barriers to access: time, money, knowledge, and honestly, a lack of meaningful enforcement, among other things. And all too often, right now, the public and journalists are left out with limited options when their requests for information are denied by records custodians. So that gets into why should we change the current system? And honestly, problems happen, disagreements happen when working with public records. Requesters may disagree with a custodian's interpretation of allowable exemptions. Requests can be ignored or partially filled, disagreements about cost, and so on. The senator talked briefly about what the process looks like now, and I just want to fill that out a little bit. So currently, the Public Information Act Ombudsman, Lisa Kirshner, who you'll hear from in just a moment, provides neutral and free mediation services to both requesters and custodians. So she opens her doors to everyone. Her process is completely voluntary, and she cannot compel anyone to come to an agreement, or honestly, even to respond to her. So if she can't solve a problem, the Public Information Act Compliance Board can rule on a super narrow jurisdiction. So they can make decisions about disputes that involve fees that are $350 or more. They can't do anything else. And so honestly, if there's a dispute, the records custodians kind of hold a lot of the cards. They could ignore the ombudsman. And I want to take a step back and say that many of our records custodians want to make sure that public records get into the hands of individuals. This is not, I don't want to characterize ever our custodians as bad actors, but problems do happen and disagreements occur. So custodians could ignore the ombudsman, and problems outside of fees over $350 can't be addressed by the compliance board. So in those cases, a requester can only go to court. And that really doesn't happen, as the senator said, in 80% of the situations, usually due to time, sometimes money, and definitely knowledge constraints. So there's just not equitable access to government information right now. So we believe 449 is the next step. The legislature in 2019 asked the ombudsman to provide recommendations to update the public records law and to make it more efficient and to work better for custodians and requesters. That report was issued in December of 2019, and the legislation and the sponsor amendments that you have before you implement the primary recommendations of the published report. It also reflects a lot of stakeholder input. We're very appreciative of the input from MACO and MML and the University System of Maryland that provided refinement and clarification. So just want to call out a couple things the bill does. It specifically increases the jurisdiction of the board's review, so the topics that they can opine on. And of course, they'll still issue written opinions. And so those topics will include things like denials of inspection and timely response. So if you never get a response, the board can now hear that issue. And the board will continue to issue written opinions, which has been very helpful in clarifying the law. It also authorizes the board to order the custodian to rectify violations, including reducing fees, adjusting costs of producing records, and producing records for inspection. So, and to clarify, only matters that have gone through or been offered mediation through the ombudsman's office will be considered by the board. So you can't just kind of leapfrog over a mediation process, which has been very successful.
Ms. Snyder, you've got a few more seconds.
I know. Okay, sorry. And so this also addresses frivolous and vexatious or bad faith requests, allowing the board to monitor and to rule on those issues, proactive disclosure of public records, and a few other minor things. This change is needed. This is the logical next step. We believe that it is the right course of action to enhance the mediation program and provide an appropriate dispute resolution.
Thank you.
Matters. We are.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Ms. Kirshner. You need to unmute yourself, Ms. Kirshner. You're muted.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman and Madam Vice Chair and members of the committee. I appreciate the chance to testify today on Senate Bill 449. I am Maryland's Public Access Ombudsman, a position that was created by the legislature in 2015 with a mission to mediate disputes that come up under Maryland's Public Information Act concerning requests for records from Maryland state and local agencies. Since we opened our doors, we have had actually around 1,800 mediations and other types of requests for assistance coming in from both agencies and requesters. And while we have had some success in this program, I'm not here today to tell you that the program is working wonderfully. It has been my experience sitting in this chair that on a regular basis, many matters cannot be resolved by mediation alone. Under the current law, when that is the case, the only remedy that is available to the parties, with the sole exception of fee disputes that are more than $350, is to go to court. In my experience, for most Marylanders, and for most agencies as well, this is not a practical or desirable remedy. It's expensive, it's time consuming. Many citizens of this state simply cannot afford to hire lawyers. And in my experience, most agencies do not want to be involved in lawsuits with their constituents anyway. There are many reasons why mediation may not work in a particular case. And those reasons can range from things like very strongly held views on both sides. That may have issues to do with other factors going on in the background that are interfering with the process, or there may not be a sufficient incentive for the parties to reach a compromise. Senate Bill 449 fills the dispute resolution gap in a very specific way. It allows the Public Information Act Compliance Board to hear more types of disputes than it can hear currently, which I mentioned before. They can only hear certain fee disputes. But this bill would allow the board to hear disputes that cannot be solved by me after a good faith effort to mediate them, based upon a certification from my office that that is the case. Ms. Snyder gave you some examples of some additional types of matters that would include. My belief is that allowing the board to handle those types of matters will greatly benefit both agencies and requesters, because it will facilitate a much timelier resolution of disputes than is currently the case. It will incentivize parties. It will incentivize parties to mediate to the best of their ability.
Ms.
And I
Kirshner,
look forward
could
to
you
answering any
conclude?
questions the committee may have.
Thank you. Very greatly appreciated.
Thank you.
Wakefield. You need to unmute, Mr. Wakefield. Could we yeah, there we go.
Okay, how's that?
Perfect.
All right, thank you. So in support of everything that's been said before, and by the way, I'm here to convey the support, not just of myself, but of the entirety of the board. We unanimously support SB 449, and in large part because it was built on recommendations that our board made. When the General Assembly created our board, they tasked us to create annual reports about how the PIA is performing throughout the state, how well it's fulfilling its job for the public, for the media, for folks who are trying to access records. And one of the things that we saw was that the Ombudsman's office, Lisa, who testified just before me, she's very effective at helping resolve issues where people are miscommunicating and there's some friction there. And there often is some tension when a member of the public is trying to get a sense of what a government agency is up to. The catch is many of her matters go unresolved. The only ones that our board can issue orders about are ones where they think that the fee that the agency is charging was artificially inflated. We can look at their pricing structure. We can say, yes, it was artificially inflated, or yes, it was valid. But that's the only thing we can do. If somebody redacted records, if they denied the request, if they took too long to give a request, if they didn't issue a waiver of the fee, there's a litany of other things that agencies are required to do in responding to PIA requests, which our board currently can't help with. And many of Ms. Kirshner's mediation efforts that go unresolved fall into that jurisdiction that our board simply doesn't have. We would like to help more. We're a volunteer board. We don't stand to personally benefit from taking on these extra powers. We expect we would stay a volunteer board if this matter were passed. We anticipated making a bigger difference than what we've been able to make, and we'd like to have that opportunity to improve the difference we can make. One thing I want to point out, it's not just the media and it's not just the public that use the PIA. We've had a request come across from members of the General Assembly who were in session trying to get records about what an agency was doing and couldn't get records to write legislation. And they came to our board, but it was out of our jurisdiction. There was nothing we could do to help. This is our attempt to try and make those inroads. So with that, I ask for your support of Senate Bill 449. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wakefield. Kyle Ross, please. Mr. Ross.
Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
My name is Kyle Ross, and I'm trying to get an autopsy report of Officer Halcomb, who died in 1976. I want to see proof of his autopsy report because someone has been incarcerated for 45 years for this death, and we've paid a lot of money for our public safety to keep this suspect behind bars. And I also think the person who's in jail, in prison, should be able to see the evidence used against him in his 1977 trial. I would love to see autopsy reports put on computers so we can just search by name. I've been denied this autopsy report. Medical examiner claims that investigation is ongoing. The suspect pleaded guilty in 2018. The 76 prosecutor, the 1976 investigator, the public defender, nobody thinks the case is still open, but somehow the medical examiner thinks the case is still open. I went through a problem resolution with the Ombudsman, and I'd like to have more recourse to get this autopsy report. I encourage you to read my written testimony because I can't put everything in 2.5 minutes. Like I said, my name is Kyle Ross, and I live in Baltimore City, and I hope this law will help me take another step to get see what the government did, see how our public safety dollars were spent. It was used as exhibit in the trial. It's not in the archives. The only way I can get it is to go through the medical examiner's office. There's holes in the story. That's all I want to do is just check what happened. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Ross. We're going to go to the two favorable with amendments, then we'll open it up for questions. Let's have Laura Anderson Wright, please, from the University of Maryland, College Park. Please unmute Ms. Anderson Wright. Ms. Stanton, I don't know if it's at our end or her end. Let's go on to Christopher Kasich, and we'll come back to you, Ms. Wright, see what we can do. Mr. Kasich, I hope I'm not butchering your name.
No, it's Kasich, but I've gotten that my whole life. I'm okay with it. Thank you. Good afternoon, committee members. Thank you for the opportunity to share UMBC's thoughts on Senate Bill 449. My name is Chris Kasich. As I've already said, I have handled UMBC's PIA requests and compliance for over 15 years, along with other primary legal responsibilities at the university. PIA requests are not what I was hired to do as an attorney for the university, but the increased numbers and complexities of the requests, the use of the PIA as a discovery technique in lawsuits, and changes to the law have demanded heavy legal involvement and oversight. But I don't want my words to be misconstrued. We strongly agree with the transparency of the government that the PIA ensures. We take great pride in responding to PIA requests in a timely and responsible manner. However, I also do not see the Public Information Act as broken. I believe institutions within USM have thoughtfully exercised the discretion afforded to agencies by the PIA, both in application of denials and redactions, as well as fee waivers. The reimbursement to agencies of direct costs incurred and amortized, or I'm sorry, listed correctly due to PIA requests makes rational sense to me. Beyond the statutorily waived first 2 hours for every single request, Maryland taxpayers should not ordinarily have to pay for the elaborate, complex, and far-reaching PIA requests. Agency independence and discretion in granting fee waivers is critical. Spending more time defending those educated and thoughtful determinations by agencies will not benefit the requesters or the agencies. That said, while we initially opposed this bill in the House, we appreciate the sponsor working with us to address a number of our concerns and can support the bill provided the amendments are adopted and the changes to the PIA are applied with the intended flexibility that's been expressed to us repeatedly. Thank you for allowing the UMBC to share our thoughts regarding Senate Bill 449. I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
So, Mr. Kasich, the amendments satisfy your concerns?
I'm not sure that I would state it that strongly. I believe that we are happy that the amendments, we're glad that we worked together to get the amendments in. I don't believe that all of our concerns were addressed. But
okay, I didn't mean to put you on the spot. I just wanted to be clear. Okay, let's go back to Ms. Anderson Wright, if at all possible. Do we have sound?
Yes, I'm here. And thank you for your indulgence. Can you hear me?
Perfectly.
Excellent. I decided to call in. For everyone who may not remember me from last year when I spoke on the bill, my name is Laura Wright, and I serve as an attorney for the University of Maryland, College Park, where I've held the role for 26 years. And like my colleague, Mr. Kasich, one element of my portfolio was the processing of public records requests. To get the basics out of the way, we all come to the table believing in transparency in government, both in the black letter sense, but also in spirit. However, unlike many people, only a few of us actually intimately understand the real-world intricacies in processing such requests. To give you an idea of scale, for calendar year 2020, my campus received 474 requests, which consisted of close to 2,000 records and tens of thousands of pages therein. So I appreciate the opportunity to speak with the board and hope that you will accept the modest amendments that House sponsor Lehrman has already put forward. They don't rectify everything. We did not get everything that we asked for. There are still vague elements of the bill. I expect my workload to increase because of the changes to the bill. However, we are here at the table willing to work collaboratively and have been working on this, me for 2 years, others for the past several weeks with Delegate Lehrman. We are assured by the House sponsor that she is open to future amendments if necessary, and we expect our Assistant Attorney Generals to work with the Assistant Attorney General representing the board and the ombuds to work through the remaining vague areas to ensure that they pass legal muster. I'm pleased to know that the House sponsor assured end users, government agencies, particularly that Section 4104 as amended under the bill is not restrictive, and they interpret implementation to be up to the agency. I will end here and make myself available if anyone has any questions.
Okay, committee, the floor is open for questions from the proponents or those with amendments.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
If there are no questions from colleagues, maybe I could just ask an open-ended from Ms. Snyder or others, just to describe the amendments, because there have been references to them, just to mollify some of the concerns of the university. There have been extensive conversations, and I think they now have no position. And Laura, it's great to see you always, an old buddy of mine. But Rebecca, maybe you can speak to those a little bit.
Yeah, briefly and succinctly, Ms. Snyder.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
So the House sponsor, Delegate Lehrman, worked extensively with the University of Maryland System Government Affairs group last week to develop amendments that would exclude fee waivers, push back implementation to July 2022, and clarify things like, when it says 30 days, it means 30 calendar days. So some of them were technical amendments. Implementation being pushed back was a major one. And then also removing fee waivers from the board's jurisdiction is something, honestly, we're not happy about either, but in the interest of having a collaborative solution is something that we support the bill still.
Great. Other questions? We don't have to have questions. We can hear from the opponents. Seeing none, we will go to the opponent, Jim Snyder from isalon.org. I believe he is the only oral opponent. Mr. Snyder.
My name is Jim Snyder. Over the past 3 decades, I've published many op-eds and scholarly articles relating to open government, including as a fellow at the Harvard Kennedy School's Shorenstein Center on media, politics, and public policy. Locally, I've published in the Washington Post, the Baltimore Sun, and Capital. As for the bill under discussion, I wholeheartedly endorse its stated purpose. Who, after all, isn't for open government? But I believe the enforcement model it doubles down on is both ineffective and counterproductive. In practice, it will foster more government secrecy, the exact opposite of its stated purpose. The crux of the matter is that the enforcement entities it relies upon have been already substantially captured by the entities they are supposed to hold accountable. Regulatory capture is a well-known problem, the subject of countless tomes published by political scientists. This bill, in its many devilish details, will aggravate that problem. As an illustration of just one of the dozens of ways this bill accomplishes that feat, MACO and MML are granted explicit control of one of the seats on the newly empowered Compliance Board. But despite their nominal championship of open government, they have functioned as inveterate, behind-the-scenes opponents of open government. If ever there was a case of the fox being placed in charge of the chicken coop, this is it. The new sweeping and vague exemption allowing agencies and the Compliance Board to dismiss complaints that are quote-unquote frivolous, vexatious, or in bad faith will be abused and allow for a dramatic weakening of the current Public Information Act, especially where it's most needed. The new reporting requirements will, unfortunately, further incentivize the enforcement entities, especially the Ombudsman, to engage in smoke and mirrors enforcement. If you really want to foster public access to public documents, I'd suggest 3 reforms widely endorsed by journalism advocates. First, place public documents online so the public need not rely on the slow and loophole-ridden PIA process. The way this bill claims to do that is mere hot air. Second, as already done in some dozen states, but not Maryland, require local governments to pay litigation costs when they lose an open government case. Third, and finally, reduce the extensive use in Maryland of what the Society of Professional Journalists calls censorship by PIO, which has made a mockery of the PIA. Censorship by public information officer is when an agency gags its expert employees in their communications with journalists, including citizen journalists. In Maryland, it has been used to profoundly weaken the PIA. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Snyder, questions from the committee for Mr. Snyder? Seeing none, that concludes the hearing on Senate Bill 449. We're going to move to Senator Washington 472. Thank all of you for testifying. Alcoholic beverage districts, legislative districting. Senator Washington. Okay, Senator Washington available? Senator Washington? Okay, then we will come back. Is Senator Eckert with us?
Second. I'm sorry, Senator Eckert was going to come in as soon as she was announced. I think she's probably going to come now since she thought Senator Washington was going first.
Okay. As soon as she gets on.
It looks like Senator Hayes is in the room.
Yes, Senator Hayes is present.
Okay, then let's go to Senator Hayes.
Okay.
Senator has a couple of bills. We'll start with Senate Bill 636, Housing Community Development, Neighborhood Revitalization, Passive House Pilot Program. We'll start with Senator Hayes. He'll be followed by Michael Rosenband and Timmy Aziz, then followed by Sterling Hardy. As I look at the witness list, there's no opposition. Senator Hayes, welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good afternoon, members of EHE Committee. This is Senator Antonio Hayes for the record. Senate Bill 636, and I'll try to be as brief as possible, is a reintroduction of Senate Bill 946 from last session, which made it successfully out of this committee and through the entire Senate. But due to the abbreviated session we had in 2020, did not get a chance to be heard in the House. This year, we're very fortunate to have a House champion to cross-file this bill, as well as members of the committee. Joining me today, as the chairman's already alluded to, is Mr. Michael Rosenband, the founder of Requity. Residents in historically redlined communities are challenged by an abundance of vacant houses and the difficulty of finding affordable housing within their community. Senate Bill 636 proposes to establish a passive housing pilot program, which seeks to alleviate some of these challenges. The passive housing pilot program, high school students will participate in renovating vacant houses alike with close proximity to their high school. A passive house is pretty much a redesigned building that meets the world's stricter standards to maximize energy efficiency. There are similar programs in places like Prince George's County, thanks to this committee who brought to our attention an organization called FACTS. FACTS stands for the Foundation of Applied Construction Technology for Students. The foundation supports student-built housing projects where single-family houses are built and sold to the general public. Students are trained under the supervision of staff and responsible for their construction of house, including carpentry, masonry, plumbing and heating and electrical and air conditioning. And so programs like this and similar to those, hopefully other vocational schools like Carver High School will have the ability to make these opportunities available. Really quickly, we provided for the committee's attention a very brief video. Since our last hearing last year, made a lot of progress. Despite not getting the legislation through, we've had great success in actually having 2 properties donated. And so with that.
1 second, I'm sharing it right now.
It might be the tab before.
Is it imminent? If not,
Yeah, I know the committee's been very generous with your time this evening, and I'm not sure if we're going to be able to overcome the technical hurdle. We could always. It's a great video. Please have a chance to look at it. We'll circulate it to the committee members. But thank you, Mr. Chairman, for this opportunity. I urge a favorable report.
thank you, Senator. Let's go to Mr. Rosenband, please, from Requity.
Thank you very much. Wonderful to be here again. Last year, we testified and attempted to field the thoughtful, practical, experienced questions posed by this committee relative to this project. Who's going to hold the deed to this house or houses? Is Baltimore City or is Baltimore City Public Schools supporting this initiative? And as Senator Hayes mentioned, have you connected with facts in PG County? So we've had a year to work hard on these to address and others. With the help of Baltimore, Requity LLC has gained site control in the deed to 2212 Pressman and are working on 2210, which is a vacant house directly across the street from Carver. We were working closely with the district, having collaborated to submit a recent career and technical education focused grant application to Maryland's Department of Education to help develop the curriculum. And we have partnered with FACTS to understand their program to help us learn from their historically successful initiative and anticipate other pitfalls. Additionally, we've established a 501c3 nonprofit organization, the Requity Foundation, to better position ourselves for funding and sustainability. And we are engaged in a block beautification project on Pressman Street, which is where the houses are located, having recently won a grant award from the United Way of Central Maryland. We've also applied for a Bernie grant and are awaiting that outcome. And then finally, instruction is underway at Carver with Carver students, and we are currently teaching design principles and are starting Passive House curriculum next month. We're committed to see this successful project through and gratefully welcome your support. And on behalf of the team, we thank this committee and Senator Hayes and his staff for sponsoring this bill.
Thank you, Mr. Rosenband. Let's go to Timmy Aziz.
So he's actually in Passive House certification programming. He was hoping to get out. I texted him. I haven't heard back. So
Okay.
Sterling Hardy's behind me, though.
Okay, how about Sterling Hardy? Mr. Hardy.
I didn't see him.
He's right here. He's with Mr. Rosenband. Please begin.
Hi, my name's Sterling Hardy. With this pilot program, I came up with it as an idea to basically bridge the gap between the work of Baltimore City schools. So like when I went to high school in Carver, because I graduated high school in Carver in 2012, after I graduated with my certification in carpentry, I tried to get a bunch of jobs, and basically they told me like I was book smart in it, but I didn't have the work experience. So what we want to do is basically bridge that gap between the work experience for the students at Carver, and not just Carver, but in all the vocational schools, to basically have the opportunity to not only learn the skills of passive housing, but learn the skills in your trade so you can actually go straight to the workforce and not have to have that big gap.
Okay. Is that your testimony, Mr. Hardy?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, then let's move to questions. Senator Carrozza.
Thank you, Senator Hayes. Thank you for bringing this bill back again. And I was just looking through it and wanted to just ask you if you had any interaction with the Department of Housing and Community Development. And the reason I ask is I represent Somerset County, which includes Crisfield. And we have both we have a real opportunity here with this program between the housing that we're trying to revitalize in Crisfield, along with a new Somerset County Technical High School in Somerset County. So I wanted to just ask you, because I always try to better understand how it would work, and I didn't know if you had gotten into any discussions with the department on how, you know, kind of the matches for this pilot program might work.
Right. No, we have had a lot of conversations with the ACD. I probably talk to them a lot more frequently than most people. But, you know, they have to develop internally, and they have already several programs in which they work with communities on community development, and most of them this committee have heard, but they are emerging within their department several entities that really work around like efficiency housing and some of the things that passive housing standards have. And so they would develop whatever processes in place to work with it. Now, this is unique in that a lot of times, and one of the things that they'll have to overcome, and they've explained to me, typically they're used to dealing with community development corporations or CDCs to transition and work in combination with, you know, the public school system is not something that they traditionally do, but providing these opportunities as early as high school would definitely bridge the gap. As I think the previous panelists that as a student spoke to, you know, having that on-a-job experience in addition to the education definitely make you more marketable as a candidate going forward.
And you do envision this pilot program statewide, is that correct?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Senator Harris.
And please, and I, you know, now is probably not the time, but Senator Carrozza, if you, you know, given your comments today, would love to offline connect with those in Somerset County to see how we could work with them as well.
Sounds good. Thank you, Senator.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, you're on mute.
Thank you, Senator. For you or Mr. Rosenband, two questions that may or may not be related. They're called passive houses, and I saw the definition, and they need to be near a school. Is the passive have to do with energy or solar? What does passive mean, number one? And related or maybe independent, depending on your first answer, will energy efficiency be included? Is it implicitly or explicitly included in terms of renovation of these houses near the schools? One is a teaching tool, and obviously to lessen our dependency on fossil fuels, as you know so well from your committee.
Michael, you want to jump in there about passive housing? You're on mute, though.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. So it's essentially passive house. It's the strictest standard for using building science to construct homes. And it's just a different way of thinking about home construction. And so there are 5 principles, but the main principle is you're really creating an airtight home so that you don't have energy leakage. And so what ends up happening is you have a home that's 90% more efficient. It also depends on how you place different windows towards the sun. There are 3-ply windows, 3-ply doors. So it's really a different way of thinking about constructing homes, which also reduces utility bills by about 90%.
That's what I was interested in learning about. Thank you. Seeing no other questions, we've had it before, and we moved along last year, so hopefully the same empathy and resonance still exist in the committee. Thank you all. I see no opposition, so that concludes the hearing on 636. Senator Hayes, while you're here, let's go to 637. This is Community Development Administration, Live Near Your School program. There seems to be a theme here. You'll be followed. You have one witness, Dawn Rhodes from the University of Maryland, Baltimore. And again, there's no opposition on this bill. Senator Hayes, the floor is yours.
Yes, and thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the Education, Health, and Environmental Committee. Very similar to the other bill, but we're going to the next level. Most of you all may be familiar with the Live Near Your Work program. This bill is Live Near Your School program. I'm joined today by the Chief Business and Finance Officer and Vice President of the University of Maryland, Baltimore, Dawn Rhodes. Senate Bill 637 invests both in students and communities around the state. The Live Near Your School program represents a natural next step from the highly successful Live Near Your Work program that was established in 2018. It does this by requiring the Community Development Association to assist public college students and recent graduates in receiving low-interest loans to purchase a house near their institution or higher education. The Live Near Your School program will also be administered by community development projects to provide current students and recent graduates with grants for purchasing homes in sustainable communities near their institution. The program has numerous other positive effects, such as reducing household travel and energy costs, elevating traffic congestion and air pollution, stabilizing neighborhoods through student investment in the community, and creating robust student housing markets. Institutions of higher education serve as anchors for many communities, enabling those who attend and graduate from these schools will help cement them in their role. I've also presented a minor amendment, which you all should have. I think the amendment number is titled 313222-1, and hopefully you all have that. It simply makes adjustments to what a current or full-time student is in a graduate school atmosphere. A home is one of the safest investments a young person can make, and a way to create a foundation for future generations. Buying a home is a huge step for young adults to begin thinking of starting a family and an assembly. We should do everything in our power to have this as an opportunity. So this is just another way. And I also believe in your testimony, we've received and been grateful to receive generous support from the University System of Maryland. And so it creates an awesome opportunity to build partnerships. And obviously it doesn't mandate that any school adopt this program. Evidently each institution would have to, on their own accord, sign up just as they do with your Live Near Your Work program, which many of our institutions also participate in. And I think Ms. Rhodes will bring powerful testimony to show you some of the examples that University of Maryland, Baltimore have done with their Live Near Your Work program. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I urge a favorable report.
Thank you, Senator Hayes. Let's go to Dawn Rhodes.
Good afternoon, Chairman Pinsky and other members of the Education, Health, and Environmental Affairs Committee. As you stated, I'm Dawn Rhodes, Chief Business and Finance Officer at the University of Maryland, Baltimore. On behalf of UMB, I would like to express my strong support for the establishment of SB 637, Community Development Administration, Live Near Your School program. The University of Maryland, Baltimore Live Near Your Work program is a home buying assistance benefit for university employees. Currently, the program offers UMB employee assistance with down payment and closing costs on newly purchased homes, as well as those requiring major renovations in designated areas. It is a program that we take great pride in. UMB contributes $16,000 per eligible participant as a commitment to its surrounding community, while the City of Baltimore will offer a matching grant of $2,500 for those who are eligible. To be eligible, applicants must be regular or part-time faculty, staff, or postdoctoral fellow employees in good standing. If you are part-time, you must work at least 50%. Participants must contribute a minimum of $1,000 toward the down payment, prove creditworthy, and complete a home ownership counseling program. From January 2018 through January 2021, the program has helped 56 employees to purchase homes in the eligible neighborhoods in Southwest and West Baltimore, meaning over half of UMB's Live Near Your Work initial $1 million investment in the subsidy has been expended. You may be interested in some of the demographics of our home buyers. Over 55% are African American, 25% are white. Our home buyers are overwhelmingly female at 80%. The average age is 36 and the average income is $83,412. You should also know that the salary range does start as low as $30,000 of those who have participated in the program. As we all know, home ownership provides an opportunity for generational wealth. So we are extremely pleased when we see that 12 of those homeowners have a high school diploma, GED, or something less than a bachelor's degree. Home ownership may be one of the few ways these employees have to develop generational wealth. Of the remaining participants, 12 of the homeowners have bachelor's degrees, 19 have master's, and 10 have PhDs. The seven neighborhoods that were part of UMB's Live Near Your Work program initially were Berry Circle, Franklin Square, Hollands Market, Mount Clair, Pigtown, Washington Village, Poppleton, and Union Square. In June 2020, the program capitalized on its success by expanding into 2 more neighborhoods with historic significance near UMB's campus, and they would be Heritage Crossing and Druid Hills. We believe by adding these neighborhoods to our program, we can stimulate additional development in these areas as we did in our initial neighborhoods. While undergraduate or graduate students do not participate in UMB's program, we believe that adding the Live Near Your School program, if funded properly, will complement our successful Live Near Your Work program at UMB. A Live Near Your School program would encourage our students to help contribute to the revitalization of West Baltimore and the city of Baltimore. And just as importantly, make the city of Baltimore their home, thereby adding to the city's tax base. As the committee is aware, UMB student population is made up of the majority of graduate and professional students. The bill language defines a recent graduate to mean an individual who within 5 years before applying for assistance under this section to have graduated from a public institution of higher education in the state with at least 120 credit hours. Under this current definition, most of our UMB graduates would not meet the 120-hour credit threshold. It is typically a threshold applied to undergraduate students. In graduate and professional programs nationally, generally they require between 30 to 60 credit hours depending on the length of the program. For example, a graduate from our social work program would earn their professional degree with only 60 credit hours. A graduate from the Master of Science in Accounting from the University of Maryland, College Park would graduate with 30 credit hours. Therefore, we would respectfully request the committee to accept the amendment as presented and to accept the language that allows recent graduates to apply for assistance from the program if they have earned at least 30 credit hours from graduate or professional degree programs. Again, we support the passage of SB 636, Community Development Administration, Live Near Your School Program establishment. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Any questions for the sponsor or his proponent? Seeing none and seeing no opponents, thank you for your patience. And we have completed that hearing. Senator Eckert, are you here with us?
I am.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Okay, then we're going to have Charter and Code Home Rule Counties, County Property Taxes, Notice of Exemption, Senate Bill 544. Senator Eckert will be followed by Drew J Ban from Mako, and then Donna Lane from Dorchester County. Please welcome, Senator.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And Madam Vice Chair, I am Senator Addie Eckert here providing testimony for Senate Bill 544, Charter and Rural Counties, County Property Leases, Notice Exemptions. and I appreciate the opportunity to on this. As a request from Dorchester County, this bill would authorize both charter and rural counties to enter into a lease that is not renewable and has a term of 5 years or without giving notice. Currently, it is required that a notice shall be published for 3 successive weeks in at least one newspaper of general circulation in the county. The county has had significant concerns about the current notice publication process, as it is lengthy and costly, and many times exceeding the cost of the property. In addition, there are concerns about the potential loss of tenants due to the process. Dorchester County has stated that these types of leases will still be placed on an open session agenda for the council's review, consideration, and discussion, giving the public the opportunity to provide comment. You will hear from Donna Lane after you hear from Mako, and I think she can explain the specific situations in Dorchester that have brought this to the council's attention. So I ask for your favorable consideration and passage of Senate Bill 544. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's go with Mr. J Ban first from Mako, and then we'll follow with Ms. Lane.
Perfect. Thank you, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. For the record, Drew J Ban on behalf of the Maryland Association of Counties here in support of Senate Bill 544. As always, you have my written testimony. I'll just make a few points. So as the sponsor said, this bill would basically create a narrow, reasonable exception to current law. It would allow for charter and home rule counties to enter into a lease without giving certain notice requirements if the lease is not renewable and has a term of 5 years or less. This exception will save money, time, and resources for counties, as I'm sure you'll hear from the next sponsor. So the basic idea here is that a short-term, non-renewable lease should not trigger the full slate of public transparency requirements as a complete and permanent disposition of publicly owned property. This poses a particular problem when a business needs to obtain a short-term lease space. The public notice requirements often mean that counties lose out on the opportunity to lease the property to those businesses because they're able to secure the property elsewhere without waiting weeks for the notice requirement process to play out. So this bill would provide counties with flexible and optional tools to make short-term property decisions without obliging expensive and cumbersome procedures more suitable for permanent sales. So accordingly, Mako requests a favorable report on Senate Bill 544. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. J Ban. Ms. Lane.
Yes, thank you, Chairman Pensky and committee members. As noted, Dorchester County Council offers its support for the Senate bill. We requested it. We have a lot of leases, some of them that renew on a monthly, some renew on a lease yearly basis. The cost of advertising of $200 per advertisement would equal $600 for each lease. We have some leases for $0. We lease to South Dorchester Community Foundation, which is a nonprofit organization. So they do community events. Another one we offer a $0 lease is the Veterans Affairs Office in our county office building, so that our veterans have an opportunity locally here to visit the office. Some leases are less than $1,000 per year. They're farm leases, mainly tillable. We've had one business due to the length of time it took, because if you go with the county council's meeting schedule, which is the first and third Tuesdays of the month, and then you add the 3 successive weeks of advertising, there are times it's much as 6 weeks before we receive a response. They receive a response to their request, and then of course we have to do the lease. We lost at least one tenant. There may be more, but I'm not aware of them. This tenant had several employees, was moving from one facility to another, needed to move, was planning on expanding in our county. Unfortunately, due to the 6-week lag time, decided instead to relocate somewhere else. We have some monthly or yearly basis leases, basically for the airport office, another space is one of them. And they could be leased to two different entities in the same year. Then, of course, we have to do the two advertisings, and sometimes that doesn't work. So we have space that's left unoccupied. The Dorchester County Council asks that we look favorably upon this bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lane. Questions for Senator Eckert, Ms. Lane, or Ms. J Ban? I see Senator Ellis's hand is up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Senator Eckert, for this bill. I just would like some clarification, please, for the counties that are charter and code home rule counties. If you could talk about the differences, and if you give us a breakout of which counties might be which.
I'm happy to answer that. I have the list up. So this would not affect Calvert, Carroll, Garrett, St. Mary's, Somerset, or Washington counties.
Okay, so which counties would, by default, does that mean it will affect the rest, or
yes,
say?
This bill would apply to the rest.
So which counties would it apply to? Can you, or,
yes.
or can you do that easily, or just tell me the ones not again?
So it would apply, up to you. It would, I can go through the list. It would apply to Allegheny, Anne Arundel, Baltimore City, Baltimore County, Caroline, Cecil, Charles, Dorchester, Frederick, Hartford, Howard, Kent, Montgomery, Prince George's, Queen Anne's, Talbot, Wacomico, and Worcester. Hopefully that's helpful.
Very helpful, very precise. Thank you. Let me put you on the
course.
spot with that, but you were prepared, so thank you so much.
Of course.
So, yeah, so since this affect my district, Charles County, my county, did they weigh in on this bill? I'm not sure if, say, other counties weighed in on this bill.
Yeah, Senator, let me interject. It's permissive. It doesn't require them to do it. They may do it, as my reading. Is that correct, Senator?
Correct.
Okay, so that means each county would have to take a proactive measure to implement this authorization.
Correct.
Okay, so thank you. That clears it up. Thank you very much.
I think if you dig deep, some folks weren't aware this was on the books. I think Dorchester County and some other counties weren't too sure about it, but other counties have been following it. So I didn't go back to look at when it was initially recorded, when the original bill was passed, but I think there have been some differences of interpretation on it. So we just wanted to make sure for our county and for the other counties, there was clarity that it was an option. Thank you.
Well, let me follow up on Senator Ellis. While it is permissive, can the county then take the action, or do they have to pass a local measure first? Ms. J Ban, do you know that, or Senator Eckert?
Or Donna, would you?
I am not positive,
I am not either.
I'm happy to figure that out and follow up.
Well, Senator Ellis, that might be relevant to your question, that's all. Right. Thank you. I'll look forward to receiving the information. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Okay, that concludes the hearing, and we'll await that answer.
Great, thank you.
Thank you for your patience. Thank you, Ms. J Ban and Ms. Lane.
Thank you.
Okay, we're going to go to Senator McCray, 699, Regional Neighborhood Initiative Program Fund. That's 699. The good senator will be followed by Ms. Mayhew, Chris Ryer, Alice Kennedy. And while I look at the testimony, I see no opposition. Senator McRae, welcome to EHE.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Madam Vice Chair, and thank you, members of the committee. Just coming to you in reference to Senate Bill 699, the Baltimore Regional Neighborhood Initiative is an initiative that we're all fond of and that we know. This bill simply extends an existing program by 4 more years, a program that we know that works, a program that was started by our good friend, Speaker Michael Bush, just to find creative ways to kind of get money on the streets to be able to help neighborhoods. The program was not only started by Speaker Bush, but I can remember back when he put former Delegate Pete Hammond in charge of it to lead the effort. And then as Pete Hammond transitioned, Steve Lafferty, former Delegate Steve Lafferty, took over this initiative. It's been so popular that we've seen it in other jurisdictions, but simply just coming to continue the good work of the Bernie program and making sure that we can keep it here. I'm joined by our Government Relations Director, Madam Director Natasha Mehu. I'm also joined by Chris Ryer. Chris Ryer, before he became our planning director, he was actually one of the people that were putting the money to the streets and putting good use to Bernie. And I'm also joined by our Housing Commissioner, Alice Kennedy. And I just asked for a favorable report on Senate Bill 699, and thank you for this opportunity once again, Mr. Chair.
Thank you for your conciseness and brevity. Let's go to Natasha Mehu, please.
Good afternoon, Chair, members of the committee. Natasha Mehu here on behalf of the
Welcome
mayor.
back.
Thank you. And we're here in support of Senate Bill 699, which would extend the sunset on the Baltimore Regional Neighborhood Initiative Program Fund. This is one of the priority bills of our administration. I want to thank Senator McRae for introducing this bill on behalf of the mayor. The Bernie program, as the senator mentioned, was established in 2013 to spur investment in older communities that had an established and successful revitalization strategy. In 2016, the program was codified into law. This same bill created the Baltimore Regional, the Bernie Program Fund, and required the governor to include $12 million in the annual budget for neighborhoods in Baltimore City and in the inner Baltimore Beltway communities of Anne Arundel and Baltimore counties. These state funds significantly helped leverage investments in a wide range of community projects, including rehabs, acquiring vacant or blighted properties, energy improvements, strategic demolition, mixed-use developments, open space, and infrastructure, just to name a few. As you will hear from my fellow panelists, the program has been a successful tool to increase economic competitiveness and livability in the Baltimore region. Unfortunately, the fund is set to sunset next year. So this bill would ensure that our region can continue to build upon the success of the program and benefit from the fund for an additional 4 more years. With that, I would urge a favorable report, and will now turn it over to my fellow panelists.
Thank you. Chris Ryer, please.
Chairman Pinsky, Vice Chair Kagan, and members of the committee. My name is Chris Ryer. I'm the Director of Planning for Mayor Brendan Scott. But as was alluded to earlier by the Senator, I used to be a practitioner of the Bernie program. First, in fact, was as Director of the Southeast Community Development Corporation. We were one of the pilot projects, primarily in Senator McRae's district and President Ferguson's district. And I am so grateful to this program because of what it was able to do for the communities of East and Southeast Baltimore. With this program, we were able to assist 4 major community organizations with capital projects. Banner Neighborhood Community Corporation for youth, provided youth and senior services, CASA Maryland services for immigrants during this very rough period. The Creative Alliance at the Patterson, one of the premier arts organizations in Baltimore. The Friends of Patterson Park provide support for what Forbes magazine calls one of the top 10 urban parks in the country. We were also able to assist with commercial tenant fit outs on a Main Street program, gap financing for homeownership projects around Johns Hopkins Hospital, homeownership incentives, neighbor improvement projects. We even implemented a series of environmental projects originally identified by Senator
Mary Washington in one of her former positions. And today, all of these neighborhoods are vibrant, dynamic, economically, ethnically, and racially diverse neighborhoods. They're very successful neighborhoods. And I can't thank you enough for this program. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Ryer. And let's go to Ms. Alice Kennedy, please.
Hi, good afternoon, Chairman Pinsky, Vice Chair Kagan, and members of the Education, Health, and Environmental Affairs Committee. I'm Alice Kennedy, Acting Commissioner for the Baltimore City Department of Housing and Community Development. I'm here today on behalf of Mayor Scott and the City of Baltimore to strongly urge the committee's favorable consideration of Senate Bill 699, the Baltimore Regional Neighborhood Initiative Program Fund, or otherwise known as Bernie. This bill would require that the Bernie program be funded at $12 million annually for fiscal years 2023 through 2026. Since 2014, when Bernie was first funded, the state has invested $34 million through more than 200 awards to organizations working in our city's neighborhoods. Bernie investment is citywide. Neighborhoods such as Central Baltimore, Park Heights, Upton, Druid Heights, Howard Park, Brooklyn Curtis Bay, McElderly Park, and Washington Village have benefited from the program. The Bernie program—
Good afternoon, Madam Chair. If you would, I'm juggling a couple of— Good afternoon, Madam Chair.
Mr. Little, we're in the middle of testimony. We always welcome you, but we're hearing on another bill, I believe.
So I'll just pick up. The Bernie program supports business growth, minimizes gentrification and displacement, preserves affordable housing, helps our seniors age in place, reduces energy bills, builds the capacity of minority and emerging developers, and creates wealth through homeownership. Bernie funds are highly leveraged. Since 2014, the state's investment has leveraged over $235 million in investment through Bernie projects and programs, through Bernie supported projects and programs. Funds are invested strategically where they have an impact, and the city and state work closely on co-investing strategies, including leveraging the city's Community Catalyst Grant Program, impact investment areas, as well as tax credit projects. The governor's fiscal year 2022 budget currently includes $12 million for fiscal year 22, and after which funding would be reduced to $3 million. Senate Bill 699 would ensure level funding of $12 million a year for the next 4 years, preserving and sustaining the momentum that is currently underway. On behalf of Mayor Scott, I strongly urge your favorable consideration for Senate Bill 699 and the Bernie program, which provides critical resources for neighborhood and community investment. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Questions, Senator Ellis?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Senator McCray, for this bill and witnesses. Yeah, and so I have several questions. I'm looking at the fiscal note, and it says, as the General Assembly can mandate appropriations in the capital budget, this have to be a pay as you go. Is that analysis correct?
Yes, the fiscal analysis is correct. And I also believe that there was a small portion that was operating too. I think it's not just capital investment. It is a very small bit that's operating.
Yeah, okay, great, thank you. And you know, our committee, the Education, Health, Environment Committee, had a tour of the Bernie site a couple of years ago. And I tell you, myself, let me speak for myself, I was very impressed with the great work that's being done there. And imitation being the sincerest form of flattery, or vice versa, right? I want to imitate this in my district. I know in Charles County, we have a community of Waldorf, which is the 5th largest city in Maryland. We have a similar population base. And so I'd love to discuss with you how we can get Waldorf in on this program, because I notice it's also Baltimore and Arundel County. So could you tell me if that's a reasonable discussion that we could have?
Yep, I'll dig into that, and I see the chair looking at me too. But this, like I said, originated out of the House, so this wasn't a Senate appropriation. approach. It was the speakers. After the challenges that we had in Baltimore City, the speaker made a number of efforts to kind of tour. He spent a significant amount of time during the interim in Baltimore City, getting an understanding of how to move forward in that direction. What came from that was a number of efforts. Bernie was not the only one, but Bernie was one of them. And he tasked Pete Hammond, the former delegate, with being put in charge. We had this program, I want to say about 5 years before the Prince George's, Montgomery, and I believe Howard may be involved, actually put forward NED. So they just started talking about NED, I want to say maybe about 2 or 3 years ago, because of the work and the success of what was coming from Bernie. So I do believe that there's always open opportunity. I'm not sure geographically where you will fit in at, Senator Ellis, but definitely worth the conversation of having.
And as we know, Bernie, in all forms, has usually been on the forefront of reforms, whichever Bernie we're talking about. Senator Washington.
Thank you, Chairman. Again, thank you, Senator, for bringing forth this bill. And this is just sort of a point of information, just with Senator Ellis, et cetera. Senator McCray and I, when we were delegates in the House, served on that group, that work group. It was what was innovative and great about it, and I do believe it's something that can be replicated, is that it's taking a regional approach. So we had members from Anne Arundel County, Baltimore City, all together understanding, and then somebody adjacent to Howard County, that our fates are all together, and that as we invest in each other. And so I think that absolutely can be replicated in the southern part of our state. We'll just build a really big bridge to Charles County.
Isn't that so?
Isn't that so, Senator? Thank you for that.
Thank you. And Senator Washington, don't go, because we're coming right back to you.
Okay.
Thank you, Senator McCray and all the witnesses from Baltimore. Thank you very much. That concludes the hearing. Senator Washington.
Yes.
7.2, alcoholic beverage districts legislative districting plan references.
Yes.
Washington, there is no opposition listed on the sheet.
It's very
Senator Washington.
Thank you so much, Chairman. It's very straightforward. This is a Baltimore City bill. It's a cleanup bill. It's really less about alcohol and more about redistricting and redrawing the lines every census. And that, after 2012 maps were drawn, no one really got around to updating the legislative maps when it came to our alcoholic beverages. And so our alcoholic beverage districts right now refer to legislative districting plan, not, to the 2002 rather than the 2012. And so one note to my colleagues, this bill does have a drafting error for which I have a technical amendment, which you should all have. Apparently, in our eagerness to update the code, the references to the redistricting maps mention the old lines of the 47th district. I believe Senator Augustine would be sort of surprised to find that he's in Baltimore City. So we are fixing that in the bill. The bill received a unanimous favorable report from the city delegation. You should have that, that letter. So I'm asking the committee to adopt the technical amendment and also issue a favorable report for SB 472 as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Washington. Seeing no questions, it's pretty straight ahead. That concludes the hearing on her first bill. Senator Washington, should we go into your next bill as well?
Yes, we could do that. Yes. Oh, yeah.
Okay, that's Bill 764.
Yes, thank you.
Work group on adaptive reuse of vacant commercial spaces. Senator Washington will be followed by Chris Parts and Bill Castelli. While there are favorable with amendments, there is no opposition.
No opposition. And colleagues, let me just say, this is not a sort of just work group bill just to have a work group bill. It's not a task force just to have a task force. I'm the House Senate Chair of the Joint Committee on Ending Homelessness. And the committee still met during the interim and really tried to look at it all in light of COVID, in light of just our ongoing housing challenges around affordability and access. What could we do? And so this bill, this work group is one of the amendments. We really want to look at the adaptive reuse of vacant commercial spaces towards ending and reducing homelessness in our state. We are in the midst of COVID-19 crisis, and so many people are increasingly housing insecure. We have this long-awaited housing needs assessment, year 10 strategic plan that was just recently released. And in that, it found that we have a pre-existing housing inventory shortage. There's a shortage of affordable and available units with overall deficit about 85,000 units for extremely low income households. It estimates that between 2020 and 2030, that Maryland will add nearly 100,000 new households earning less than half the median income level. So that means about 49,000 of those individuals will qualify as extremely low income households, and 47,500 will qualify as very low income. So just a little more math and I'm done, I promise. Out of the 167,000 severely cost-burdened rented households in the state. And again, we've received testimony from agency providers. We have extensive experience talking with individuals about what we can do. More than 120,000 have extremely low incomes and are right now at risk of losing their housing. We reviewed many aspects of our housing crisis and came up with several recommendations, including examining adaptive reuse of large vacant spaces. And that you're seeing increasingly, we're going to anticipate there'll be more. There are many reports that individuals now who had been working in commercial spaces, that we may never really return to that. We were already seeing an abandoning of city centers. We're seeing transition of schools, of hotel space. So we concluded that we could assess the underutilized or unutilized existing structures, that then we could create policies to encourage and incentivize the adaptive reuse of such structures. That would be something that would put Maryland on the forefront. Other states are looking at this just specifically to address some housing shortages around housing homeless populations, of people who are experiencing homelessness, and for temporary shelters. But we believe that we could have the opportunity to really create a new market and real opportunity, given there's going to likely be less new construction being built, that we can look at this adaptive reuse. So we really need to understand the potential benefits. So colleagues, we talked to the Fair Housing Action, they testified with us. We were in communication and heard from the Maryland Multi-Housing Association, the Department of Housing and Community Development, and also recently the Lord Baltimore, which has been used as a way for the health department, the Baltimore City, to allow individuals to house in place as they are recovering from COVID, or if they are living in group housing, for them to be able to isolate. And so this adaptive reuse of Lord Baltimore we felt like was this great model. Here we had a private entity that said, look, I'm not renting rooms. You have a need to allow people to doctors, to nurses, to people who are experiencing homelessness, to be able to isolate. Why don't we work together? And so that happened. And so we thought, wow, is this something that we could expand statewide? We spoke with the National Conference of State Legislators. They also presented us about how other states are engaging in adaptive reuse. So again, right now the hotel is providing housing and rooms to over 600 homeless persons. And this project was funded through this public-private partnership of about $103 million that Baltimore received through the Federal CARES Act. So we also see this as an opportunity to leverage potential federal dollars that are coming to the states. And then we will have the data and information that we need so that we can begin to ask for those things. So this is a creative response to the pandemic by using underutilized hotels. It's illustrated when you have a combination of existing infrastructure and supplemental funds. So there's been highly successful projects across the country. Cleveland, Ohio has used a former hospital that's sat empty for 12 years before converting it to 137 dwelling for low-income seniors. In Woodbury, New Jersey, a former opera house was converted into housing for homeless veterans. In Richmond, Virginia, a former lumber yard was converted into 61 affordable housing units. So from Ohio to Virginia, New Jersey, there are policies that are supporting adaptive reuse of structures. There's just, again, there's currently a 1988 federal vacant property program that has accessed vacant federal buildings for housing conversions, and it long has had a policy to prioritize the reuse of existing infrastructure. We could model that. So SB 764 creates a framework for the work group to study feasibility, as well as the limits of converting the vacant housing. So again, there's been some requests by amendments from several advocates. I'm absolutely interested in incorporating those. But again, colleagues, this is not a bill just to have a bill. We could get legislation. We'll have an opportunity to act on it in the 22 session as we know more about the COVID crisis as it affects housing.
Thank you.
Much for your favorable report.
Thank you, Senator Washington, for this bill. Mr. Parts, welcome back. Chris Parts will be followed by Bill Castelli.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I'm Chris Parts, an architect with AIA Maryland, representing nearly 2,000 architects across the state. We certainly acknowledge the need to provide more affordable housing in Maryland, and we agree that if we can assess how to repurpose existing buildings, that may be the quickest way to get there. As an architect who's done significant amount of renovation and repurposing in my 30 years of practice, we know that architects can be a valuable part of the conversation, which is why we're suggesting an amendment that adds an architect to this work group. Just a few reasons why we think it's important to add an architect to this group. First is that there are code requirements that are different for commercial versus residential buildings, and that's something that we understand and can help to assess how to best do that. Secondly, part of making housing affordable is reducing operating costs in addition to minimizing capital costs. So architects are well versed in focusing on sustainable design, and we would certainly help to identify means or buildings that can be readily adapted to reduce the demand for energy. And finally, architects can bring creative problem-solving skills to solve issues like converting opera houses to housing or hospitals to housing and such. And for these reasons, we ask for your support of House Bill 764 and ask for adoption of our proposed amendment to add an architect to that work group.
Thank you, Mr. Parts. I don't see Mr. Castelli. Bill, are you with us? Okay, seeing not and seeing no questions, that completes the hearing on Bill. I'm sorry, Senator Kagan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is not going to be a great question, but I just want to say, Senator Washington, thank you for this really thoughtful and important legislation. And I love the idea. And I know of lots of examples also, including we just did a big tribute to the retiring director of Imagination Stage, which is one of the largest and most successful theater programs for kids with and without disabilities. And it's a performing audience and a stage, and it's in a garage, a parking garage. And so that was a creative reuse. And so there are lots and lots of examples. So Mr. Parts, thank you for your contribution to the conversation. And thank you, Senator Washington. Isn't that so?
Yes, and along the same path, I grew up not super far from Woodbury, New Jersey. I can't remember the Opera House, but I'm going to look back and see what I can find on that. Okay, thank you, Senator Washington, Mr. Parts. That concludes the hearing on 764. Senator Hester, 722, that is Department of Small Business Entrepreneurship and Innovation established. We'll have Senator Hester, followed by Greg Holmes. And as I look at the testament, well, there's one opponent. Senator Hester, welcome. You have the stage.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm wondering, I sent a PowerPoint. I'm wondering if you pull that up. Is that possible?
One moment. Let me see. I don't remember seeing a PowerPoint, but I can check. Let's see.
Lamori, I sent an email around 1 o'clock, I think.
Today?
Today, yeah.
Okay, that's why. Hold on.
I'm so sorry. I'll start talking while she's looking.
That's it.
Mr. Chairman, Madam Vice Chair, members of the committee, thank you for your consideration of this bill, Senate Bill 722. Throughout the pandemic, small businesses around the state have been calling my office from my district and probably your offices from your district during this difficult time. And what I've heard time and time again is that our state systems are really complex and a bit difficult to navigate. That's not to say that our agencies aren't doing good work. It's just to say it's kind of hard to figure out how to tap into the state resources. Right now, and then Lamar, if you go on to slide number 2. Awesome, thank you. Right now, we have a number of programs that do relate to small minority and women-owned businesses. But by the virtue of them being dispersed throughout the government, sometimes they can appear disjointed. And we also have some very ambitious diversity and veteran contracting goals, but we fail to reach them year after year. So the ultimate goal of this bill is to break down these barriers for small businesses to better utilize state resources and to maintain a competitive business marketplace. And I do want to acknowledge that the chair said that there was opposition. So if you guys can just stay with me on the merits of the bill, I will speak to the opposition at the very end. Next slide, please. Establishing the Department of Small Business, Entrepreneurship and Innovation. This was inspired by the U.S. Small Business Administration. This new department would serve as kind of the one-stop shop for small businesses and entrepreneurs seeking to help out from the state. And it would be a strong advocate for small businesses across state government. And I'll be the first to admit that the bill, if you print it out, it's actually quite long, it's a bit complicated. And that's one of the reasons why I've developed this PowerPoint to help kind of give you the basics of the bill. Next slide, please. So the department would actually take the place of the Governor's Office of Small Minority and Women-Owned Business Affairs in the Governor's Office. So instead of being an office, it becomes a department. It would absorb also certain responsibilities from the Department of Commerce and the Department of Labor that are already focused on small minority women and veteran-owned businesses. And the goal of the sponsor in the House is Delegate Jazz Lewis. And his goal was to not require any more spending, but to increase government efficiency through the reallocation of these employees. So by rehousing the small business programs under one agency, we think that it would be simpler for our small businesses to find help at the state level. So basically, all staff right now who have more than 50% of their time assigned would be transferred to Department of Small Business, Entrepreneurship and Innovation. And so that would include 11 full-time equivalents at the Governor's Office, 5 within the Department of Commerce, and 5 within the Department of Labor. Next slide, please. So there also are some amendments, and the part of this amendment would change the reporting lines for all of the small business and MBE liaisons that are currently embedded across all of our agencies. Now, these are the people who actually do the purchasing for our agencies. And so when you think about trying to meet, our goals, we want to see how these purchasing agents are actually incentivized to work. And the idea is that these people would not have to move out of the departments they're currently in, but just that their reporting lines would change. So this would ensure that those advocating for diversity aren't being pressured to not push the competitive bidding process. And this was an issue in House Bill 991 of last year. Next slide, please. So as we continue to think about government procurement, this new department would, first of all, they'd help in 2 ways. First of all, they provide more technical assistance to make the small minority and women-owned, veteran-owned businesses more competitive for state procurement contracts. So this would be accomplished by using the various small business development centers, women business development centers, veteran business development centers, minority, blah, blah, blah. And it would really help to make sure that those minority or different types of small businesses, they all know how to participate in government contracting. In addition, as part of one of the amendments, they would also require a bilingual or multilingual navigator to help small businesses navigate across the state agencies and connect them with the various resources that that will still exist, but have not been pulled under this one umbrella agency. Second, we think we need to support our own procurement practices. Government employees need to be trained on how to do this purchasing. And so the agency would provide technical assistance to all the agencies in how to buy from small businesses. It would require the agency to produce a set of recommendations for unbundling contracts to achieve the goals of the governor's recent executive order from January 1st of this year on how to increase small business participation in state procurement. It would also require this new agency to work with DoIT to design a much more user-friendly customer interface for the online directory of Maryland small and minority women-owned businesses. Useful not only for state agencies to purchase, but maybe universities, maybe other private sector companies want to buy from small and minority and veteran-owned businesses. It would also be the intent of this bill that the MBE procurement scorecard, which this bill calls for, and an overall annual performance would be discussed annually at each agency's budget hearings so that our goals would hopefully go up. And those the tiny little, you can't really see them, but those two tiny little buildings over there, these are flagging that there are several recommendations from the President Pro Tem's working group. Now, that working group I was not part of, but I think great minds think alike. And there's a number of recommendations around procurement that are in that report that I think coincide very nicely with what we're talking about here. So moving on to the next slide, as a new agency, the Department of Small Business, Entrepreneurs and Innovation must prepare an economic impact analysis rating, and an economic impact analysis is appropriate for each regulation that the agency could propose to adopt. And this requirement parallels the existing requirement for DLS. And so they'll also be reporting, I mentioned earlier, on an update of the status of small business to the state, the scorecards for each unit on their participation with these goals, an update on the small business outreach and training efforts, and an update on projects undertaken in consultation with local economic development corporations. Next slide. So now we get to the opposition. And once again, I had an interesting conversation with the Department of Commerce, the governor's office, and some other key stakeholders, who oppose this bill. And really, I kind of took their opposition to heart. Some of it makes sense. But some of what they're saying actually speaks to the need for this bill. So I'd just like to address this opposition head on. So the first comment was that from Commerce is that the bill disrupts the operation of this FIDBA and other small business assistance programs, and it could cause a disruption to the service. And the Department of Commerce is right. It's a fair point for them to make, and we could look at how best to make sure that the disruption wasn't too bad, because I know that they share our goal in the ultimate goal of helping small business. Their second point of opposition was the transfer of staff and positions. These would deprive Commerce of needed positions as the folks working with the Miss BIDFA program also perform necessary duties for other programs within the department. And they would lose this skill set and institutional knowledge. And this could jeopardize the federal funds in the future. So, I think it sounds like the department and staff are doing double work. They're doing this one job and they're doing another job. I mean, all of us in government do multiple jobs, but maybe it's time that we had people working full time on small business. Their third point of opposition is that the Commerce is saying that most of the assistance goes to small business programs and services targeted to small business and should be easily accessible one-stop shop services. And so I absolutely agree with that statement. I think that speaks to this bill rather than against this bill. And so maybe it's rather some form of disagreement for how we approach this bill. Okay, going on to the opposition from the Governor's Office of Small Business. They say that the proposed massive restructuring and rebranding will prove to be costly and ill-timed. The Governor's Office has one of the highest customer service satisfaction ratings across the state. And just because people are pleased with this office is why we want to expand it. We want to elevate this office and expand the work that it's doing because it's doing such a good job. Right now, they're mostly focused on policy, and they don't have the capacity to kind of operationalize and implement stuff. And we agreed with that when we spoke on Friday. Second point of opposition, the inability to find correct contact person to resolve or address an issue is one of the most recorded complaints about government constituents at large. And this is exactly what I'm hearing. So I think that we are in their opposition. They are agreeing with me that this is a problem for small businesses. And point number three, moving from a policy/advisory role to an operational role is tricky. I can understand how that might be the case. And I believe that we need to do more to operationalize and build muscle to support small business across the state. Next to last slide, folks, and there's not much testimony, so bear with me. But I'm asking, why now? Why now? And one of the things that I've learned in disaster mitigation is that the time to rebuild better is right after a disaster. And so, if you think about, you can't see the disaster necessarily caused by the pandemic, but you can feel it in the economy. You can feel it in it's there. It's just like having a really bad flood. And so following this, we're looking, FEMA has said that 40% of businesses do not open following a disaster. And of those that do reopen, another 25% fail within 1 year. SBA has said that 90% of the businesses fail within 2 years after being struck by a disaster. So my point here is that recovery doesn't end when a business reopens the door. It's the start of a really significant process. And, I've felt this in Ellicott City for, some time now. And I just, my heart just aches. And I think we need to do everything that we can to support our small businesses as they recover from this pandemic, because the recovery is going to take at least 3 years. So in summary, I just want to say that this bill will make sure that our small businesses receive operational support and focus that they need to return from this pandemic stronger than ever. And I would respectfully request a favorable report on SB 722. And I believe we have one witness to testify, and then I'm obviously here to answer any questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Senator Hester. Mr. Holmes.
Good afternoon, Chair. Good afternoon, members of the committee. My name is Greg Holmes. I'm a third-generation Prince George's County resident. I'm a business owner. My 74-year-old mom has been a business owner for 50 years, and my wife's a business owner. And so, during the past year has been unprecedented times for small business, specifically Black-owned businesses. And as we sit here, we believe unprecedented solutions should meet the moment, if you will. What we've seen over the last year have seen small businesses close, particularly Black businesses. As I mentioned, I live in Prince George's County, so we have been disproportionately affected by COVID, not only in our communities, but in the resources and businesses that aren't thriving now. And so we're looking to support dedicated and direct resources in a department that can specifically address needs of small and Black-owned businesses in the state of Maryland. As the Senator mentioned, Department of Commerce and Office of Small and Minority Business have done a good job, but in unprecedented times, good's just not enough. And we need another level, the elevated level of direct support and resources by establishing a department. So in closing, I strongly encourage and hope that this committee takes the issues of Black businesses, minority businesses, and small businesses into account, and not just do the same thing and just, a little bit differently, but really stretch the limits of what the state can do and provide direct resources and dedicated resources to address and support small businesses. So Senator Hester, thank you for the time, and committee, thank you as well.
Thank you, Mr. Holmes, who's a Prince Georgian, like myself. Senator Hester and Mr. Holmes are available for questions. Senator Carrozza has the first one.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and Senator Hester, thank you for all your work on small business. Since the early adjournment in March of the session and during the interim, we met on a bipartisan basis with the Senate Small Business Work Group, and you really kept those meetings on track. And, you know, when I think about those meetings, we focused a lot on what we needed to do for the immediate. We had businesses that were shut down and in need of immediate relief. And then we also, I thought, started some conversations of what you mentioned in your testimony, which is that this will be a long-term recovery. And I'm not really sure that the people of Maryland and even us as legislators across the board really recognize the extent of how long this recovery will be for our small business operators. So with that said, you know, we have, I think, done a good job of focusing on the immediate. We spent a lot of time to make sure there was emergency relief for our small businesses in the emergency relief bill. We did not, as a small business work group, talk about any of these major reorganization plans. And I look at that more that, you know, when we're talking about implications of long-term policies. And I guess my question would be, you know, I know that we, you know, suspended our meetings during session because session started, and then we work our bills and we work our committees, and I understand that. But you know, this could be perhaps an issue that we take back to our bipartisan small business work group. And if there's a way to, and I'm not sure what a reorg might look like, or with feedback from the current administration, how we can improve our services. But I guess I would ask you if you would consider something like that, because at this point, this is major reorganization that I'm not sure we're prepared to go forward at this point with it.
Thank you very much, Senator Carrozza. I really appreciate your acknowledging the hard work that we did together this summer, really helping our small businesses immediately. So this bill is coming from the House. I cross-filed it for Delegate Jazz Lewis. They had a parallel work group, you know, over the summer that was looking at small business issues. And I thought this was a really important conversation to start having. And to shed some light on this issue. You know, as you so correctly mentioned, we focus really on immediate relief. And I think we need a 2 or 3 year plan, and we need the state resources to do it. So, I mean, I'd be happy to talk with you and any others about how best to move forward, definitely.
Carrozza for the question. Thank you, Senator Carrozza, and Senator Hester for a response. Senator Ellis.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Senator Hester, for this presentation. Well done. And I know it's from all that work you did in the work group. And part of your answer to Senator Carrozza's question, answer the question I was going to ask. So thank you so much. And I'll turn it back over to the chairman.
Thank you, Senator Ellis. There are no further questions. Obviously, Senator Hester summarized the opposition from the department, but I'd still recommend people read it, as well as all the other testimony. There are a number of people who also supported as well, County Executive Ball from Howard County among those. So that concludes the hearing on 722. Thank you all. Thank you, Mr. Holmes. Moving on to 751. Charles County Senators. I think it's Charles County Senator, our own Senator Ellis. And then we will, after that, go to SJ2 when you're done. On 751, it's Human Relations Commission. The Senator will be followed by Dothia Sweet and Reverend Little. Senator Ellis.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman, committee members. I'm here presenting Senate Bill 751, the Southern Maryland Human Relations Commission. The basic goal of this bill is to bring a Human Relations Commission to Charles County. As it was explained with Senator Eckert's bill, Senate Bill 544, these cold home rule counties, charter counties, we're all tied together with what we do. And this bill affects the Charles County, Calvert, St. Mary's County issues. And in the bill, it talks about St. Mary's County a lot. And I'm just here presenting this bill to lead on this bill is Delegate Davis in the House. And so we have some ongoing discussions, and I'm going to bringing in the St. Mary's Senator with this to expand the discussion to make sure that this bill affects us in a proper manner, because the Code Home Rule County issue is very complicated. What affects one county affects the other. So we have to make sure we do it right. But the basic aim of this bill, Mr. Chairman and committee members, is to bring a Human Relations Commission into Charles County. And we don't have one now. And so we look forward, by the time hopefully we get to a voting session, to have all the issues worked out and the proper courtesies to my fellow Southern Maryland Senator, St. Mary's Senator done. And so I'm fully supportive of this bill. Ask for your favorable consideration of it, and we'll work out all the details by the time we get to a voting session. And I must say, the lead witness is president of the Charles County branch of the NAACP, and it's Diotha Sweat. And so she's been here before, testifying before us. And so she's, I believe, is the lead witness. And I return that to you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator. And Ms. Sweat, welcome back to the committee.
Good afternoon, Chair Pinsky and committee members. My name is Diotha Sweat, and I am the president of the Charles County NAACP. I am submitting this testimony in support of SB 751, Southern Maryland Human Relations Commission. In 2018, a group of concerned citizens residing in Calvert, Charles, and St. Mary's County came together to form an informal Southern Maryland Advisory Board on Civil Rights to help identify information gaps and racial disparities. The Charles County NAACP is a member of that advisory board, and so far the board's research has shown that Southern Maryland has no local legislation or Office of Civil Rights where citizens can file a complaint, as well as experience racial profiling and disparities in housing, healthcare, contracting, and employment opportunities. In addition, there are more civil rights issues than the Charles County NAACP has the bandwidth to handle. As our county grows and becomes increasingly diverse, measures like the commission are necessary to secure the civil rights for all. The proposed commission will serve as a civil rights policy arm of the county government to enforce local civil rights laws, direct its efforts and resources towards eliminating discriminatory practices within the county in areas of housing, employment, education, county government contracts, and other facets of the county where such practices may exist. Currently, residents who feel they have been discriminated against must file their complaint with the Maryland Commission for Civil Rights located in Baltimore, Maryland. An office that is physically located in Charles County and that has the appropriate legislative language that links it to the state's office is long overdue and desperately needed. The commission serves several crucial functions, including it will work to eliminate infringements of civil rights of all persons in the county, investigate and hold hearings on allegations that denies people their civil rights, and most importantly, it will allow subpoena power. In closing, this commission would help to ensure that Charles County lives up to its promise of equal opportunity and free from discrimination. Therefore, Charles County NAACP strongly urges a favorable report for SB 751. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Sweat. Reverend Little, welcome back.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, Mr. Chairman and Senators. I'm Reverend Kobe Little here representing the Maryland State Conference of the NAACP. We want to thank Senator Arthur Ellis and the members of the Southern Maryland delegation for sponsoring this legislation. We're here today in support of President Diotha Sweat and to ask for a favorable report on this legislation. Listen, democracies are about people, and human relations commissions are designed to help people to work together effectively and to find redress when their rights are violated. Passing this legislation will go a long way in bringing together the diverse communities of Southern Maryland to build a strong Southern Maryland and by extension, a strong Maryland. So we do urge a favorable report on this legislation and offer thanks for your service. As a side note, Mr. Chairman, if you would indulge me, let me extend my prayers to the members of the Senate who have tested positive, and just express to all of you that my prayers go out to you senators and the members of your staffs and family. God bless you.
Thank you, Reverend Little. And I must say, on the way driving into Annapolis today, there was a radio report about your work in Baltimore, trying to combat the pandemic and encourage people to wear masks and distance. So I think we all appreciate your work in the community at the grassroots level, trying to bring people along in compassion and also safety. So thank you. Questions for the sponsor or the proponents? Seeing none, I know my county already has an Office of Human Rights, and it's very active and has been there for many years. Okay, thank you. Let's go to Senator Ellis's SJ2, urging the renaming of the town of Indian Head. And then that'll be followed by the final bill of the day, Senator Lamb's bill. Senator Ellis.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman, fellow committee members. For the record, Senator Arthur Ellis, representing Charles County in the Senate of Maryland. And the resolution, Senate Joint Resolution 2 is urging the renaming of the town of Indian Head. So over the past year plus, we've seen a great awakening throughout our country and the world with issues affecting disparate groups of citizens. And we've had across the country, cities and states, even the federal government, looking at names for our institutions. Military bases have been put on the list to be renamed. In last year's Defense Authorization Act, it was put in law to rename certain bases named after Confederate general. And the country has really taken a great stride into looking at names of institutions, organizations, names for locations to really address the need for equity and inclusion. And quite a few members of my community, principally led by Native Americans, saying that the name of Indian Head is offensive to them. And I strongly believe, as I represent everyone in my district, I have to take this serious. So this bill will not rename the town. It's a statement from the body, the Senate of Maryland, saying that, this name is offensive to some folks, and hopefully we respect that, and to urge the town of Indian Head to continue on the process to look at changing their name. The owner of the Washington football team said over the years, I will never change the name. But last year, he got rid of the name that many consider offensive, and now looking for a new name through that process. This would be an orderly process for the town of Indian Head. I've worked with the mayor and Commissioner Coates, who represent that district, and meetings with them, conversations with citizens. And I tell you, a lot of folks are for it, some are against it, but I strongly believe what is offensive to a few should be offensive to all, and we should really work to make sure that our institutions reflect a name that is considered neutral to all. So I ask you for your favorable vote on Senate Joint Resolution 2, urging the renaming of the town of Indian Head. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Reverend Little, followed by Ms. Sweat.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, thank you, Senator Ellis, for offering this important resolution. All of us saw the symbols of white supremacy that flew in the Capitol of the United States on January 6th. We all know how dangerous the naming conventions and the symbols of white supremacy are, how much of a threat they pose to democracy. They're not only a threat to the institutions of this country, but they pose a real and present threat to many of the people of this country who continue to be terrorized by names like Indian Head or Buckhead or Blackhead, names that are designed to commemorate often a terrible, violent event and designed to intimidate people of color when they encounter those names and symbols. We've got a lot of work to do in Maryland to address the structural inequity that is created by white supremacist symbols. We will be dealing with the state song again, and I believe the vice chair of this committee will be addressing that. This resolution is an important first act in removing the name there in Charles County. At some point, we have to have a state seal that is representative of all Marylanders and not just of a fisher and a farmer who were invaders, enslavers, and colonizers. So whether you are like me and you count among your ancestors those who are of the First Nations, or you're simply a beneficiary of the lands that were stolen from the First Nations, now is your time to act, to create equity in Maryland's symbols and namings. We urge a favorable report on Senate Resolution number 2. Thank you.
Thank you, Reverend Little. Ms. Sweat.
Good afternoon again, Chairman Pinsky. I am submitting this testimony in support of Senate Joint Resolution number 2, urging the renaming of the town of Indian Head. The Charles County NAACP strongly supports this resolution because it addresses a crucial matter of racial and ethnic social justice in Maryland. As Marylanders, we find ourselves daily surrounded by the names that honor our rich cultural past, including Piscataway, Conroy, and Chopton. These names are all derived from the original inhabitants of Maryland and honor their contributions to our state. By contrast, the name Indian Head does not positively reflect upon our state's thousands of indigenous American citizens. Instead, it is offensive to many of them. There are also several troubling stereotypes and negative connotations attached to the name. We agree with the authors of this resolution that Maryland has inherited interest in respecting and protecting the rights and rich cultural histories of its citizens. Having a town name that deeply offends our entire racial and ethnic demographics defies the Maryland's duty to uphold the values of dignity and respect for the cultural diversity of the state. The choice here is clear. The Maryland Senate should fully support this resolution to rename the town of Indian Head to a name that honors, not alienates, our indigenous American brothers and sisters. Therefore, we strongly urge a favorable report for Senate Joint Resolution number 2 to change the name of the town in order to better reflect the state of Maryland's respect for the indigenous history, culture, and persons. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Sweat. Questions for any of the proponents? Questions? Seeing none, that concludes the hearing on SJ2. Thank you all for your patience. We move to the final bill of the day, Senator Lamb, 922, Office of Legislative Audits, investigation of allegations of fraud, waste, and abuse. We'll have Senator Lamb begin, and he'll be followed by Greg Hook, Joe McWilliams, Brian Tannen, and Charlton Howard has favorable with amendment. A number have favorable with amendments. We'll take them all together. Senator Lamb, you can start off, please.
Sure. Lamari, if you could bring up the slides, please. Sorry, I was muted. So members of the committee, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Here to present SB 922 for the record, Clarence Lamb, Senator in District 12. If you can go to the next slide. So for a bit of background, most of you here are familiar with the Office of Legislative Audits within the Department of Legislative Services. They're obviously tasked with conducting audits and evaluations of state agencies and local school systems. As you're aware, their work is independent, nonpartisan. They do great work. You can actually sign up to get their updates via email when they come out. In my role serving as the co-chair of the Joint Committee on Audits and Evaluations is why this bill is coming forward. So if you can go to the next slide, OLA operates a fraud hotline. This service went online back in 2003 and is a dedicated resource receiving allegations of fraud, waste, and abuse within state agencies. Since its launch, it's averaged over 400 contacts each year. These allegations are evaluated by a dedicated staff at OLA, and if warranted, either is referred to an appropriate state agency for internal review or added to tasks in regularly scheduled fiscal compliance audits or investigated individually as a special audit. The next slide. So SB 922 was crafted following concerns that OLA had brought to the attention of myself and Delegate Krim, who's the House co-chair of the Joint Committee on Audits. We heard these conversations concerning instances of refusal from certain agency leadership to partner with OLA in educating their staff about the purpose and even the existence of the fraud hotline. OLA has at times found it difficult to compel certain agencies to display the hotline advertisements or flyers, as well as disseminate periodic informational materials to state agency employees that orient them to the purpose and the function of the hotline itself. We have found just in recent memory a few reasons to strengthen the state's ability to conduct oversight and make these policy improvements. And while it's an obvious function of this hotline to investigate behaviors and policies that lend themselves towards concerns, the hotline itself does a great job in recommending performance improvements that perhaps are needed but face internal reluctance within the agency itself. So this bill is meant to codify OLA's role in investigating fraud, but also confirm its role in the independent appraisal of state government policies to improve overall efficiencies, even if there is no criminal implication to the allegations that are presented. So what this bill does is compel state agencies to increase awareness of the hotline by mandating that promotional posters, such as the one that you're seeing here on the screen, are displayed in a highly visible location at physical state agency campuses, as well as their websites. It includes language that codifies the timely coordination between state agencies and OLA. It also allows for the reporting of instances of waste, fraud, and abuse to OLA that are within their scope and purview and otherwise not prohibited by existing law. And it lastly prepares an evaluation to be delivered to the General Assembly with insights gathered from the enactment of this legislation. Next slide. Both the House and the House sponsor and myself have introduced an amendment to clarify the purpose and authority of this legislation. I would like to thank our colleagues at OLA, the Office of the State Prosecutor, the Attorney General's Office, and a few other entities that have been involved in the development of this bill. As the original text was drafted, there were some unintended expansions of the authority granted to OLA that we were advised should be remedied. And so we've done so with that should significantly reduce, if not outright eliminate, the costs that are mentioned in the fiscal note. When the text was reviewed, it was brought to our attention that various subpoena powers and sharing of information with agencies such as the State Prosecutor's Office and the AG's office would require some costly outside legal review to coordinate that process. And so we tried to address that as well. As I'm sure you'll hear from our subsequent panelists, the bill is not intended to drastically alter the Office of Audits authority over state agencies, but rather to codify their partnership to affirm OLA's pre-existing responsibilities. It's our understanding that after conversations with the state prosecutor's office, that concerns still exist regarding some of the proposed amendment language, and we're certainly open to discussing and receiving language that clarifies the roles and responsibilities, but also helps maintain the bill's purpose.
Thank you, Senator. You're right. We'll lead off with Mr. Hook from OLA, followed by Brian Tannen, also of OLA, followed by Charlton Howard from the State Prosecutor's Office. Mr. Hook.
Thank you. On behalf of the Office of Legislative Audits, thank you, Senator Lamb, for submitting this legislation. Good afternoon. For the record, I'm Gregory Hook, the Legislative Auditor, and I will provide some insight into OLA's process for crafting the original legislation and the basis for the sponsor amendment to SB 922. The impetus for this bill was resistance from several state agencies to displaying our fraud hotline poster or otherwise make the hotline known to their employees using other means, for example, emails. In 2003, after an OLA survey of other state and legislative auditors, the then Joint Audit Committee requested OLA to establish a fraud hotline, a powerful tool that was found lacking in Maryland state government. Since its inception, the hotline has been an effective independent conduit for allegations of fraud, waste, and abuse in state government operations. A 2020 survey by the Association of Certified Fraud Examiners, or ACFE, of 338 frauds occurring at government organizations found that 43% of the frauds were found by tips, with the second largest source being internal audit work at 15%. Worldwide studies by the ACFE consistently show fraud hotlines are the primary source of identification of frauds and resulted in the more timely identification of fraud with lower median losses. This brings us to the reason for the bill. OLA believes the aforementioned refusal by agencies to promote the hotline would stifle reporting to an independent entity, OLA, and possibly shift allegation reporting to the agencies. This would permit them to deal with allegations internally as they deemed fit and might discourage employees from submitting allegations of fraud for fear of reprisal. OLA audit reports have demonstrated such internal agency reviews of allegations were not always conducted comprehensively and that conclusions reached and actions taken were not always appropriate. I do not want to give you the mistaken impression that OLA wants all allegations reported exclusively to us. Far from it. On our fraud hotline website, we include links to other state and federal hotlines and encourage individuals to use discretion in reporting. For example, we have direct links to other hotlines, including those for Medicaid, welfare benefit, child support enforcement, and consumer insurance frauds. In addition to the statutory language to address the hotline, OLA thought it prudent to codify some of its fraud investigative operations. In keeping with past practice, OLA surveyed other state and legislative auditors that operate fraud investigation units, plus similar Maryland agencies to identify additional investigative processes and authority to ensure that our mission and means were consistent, robust, and appropriate for conducting fraud investigations in a thorough manner. As Senator Lamb mentioned, since the bill's introduction, the State Prosecutor's Office and the Attorney General Criminal Division, with whom we have a long-standing working relationship, advised us that the bill unintentionally provided OLA with excessive authority. They shared several concerns, but if I could generalize, they indicated that the proposed statutory language was so broad as to enable OLA to unilaterally interject itself into those agencies' active investigations, which was never our intent. We reached out to both these offices to discuss possible solutions and agree with the changes contained in the sponsor amendment, which removes several provisions contributing to the unintended excessive powers. Other critical hotline authorities for which there was no concern by those offices remain in the bill. The sponsor amendment also adds non-codified language that OLA work with these offices to identify the appropriate means and future statutory language to achieve our original intent of codifying OLA's fraud fighting abilities. We believe that the state prosecutor and the criminal division are willing to aid OLA in developing any necessary statutory language to accomplish our original intent, and OLA is committed to reporting the results of that collaborative process with those offices to the Joint Audit and Evaluation Committee. Finally, we believe that the cost estimates contained in the original fiscal note should be eliminated by the changes contained in the sponsor amendment. That concludes my prepared remarks. And I'd like to first thank Senator Lamb, Senate Co-Chair of the Joint Audit and Evaluation Committee, for sponsoring the legislation. Second, the committee for its consideration of this amended bill. And finally, but not least, the members individually for your continued support of the Office of Legislative Audits. If the committee has any questions, we have on hand Brian Tannen, who is the Director of OLA's Compliance and Performance Audit Division and a past president of the Maryland chapter of the Association of Certified Fraud Examiners, and Joe McWilliams, the manager of OLA's newly enlarged Fraud Investigation Unit. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Tannen, if you're there to answer questions, let's hear from Mr. Howard from the state prosecutor, then we'll open up the questions for all of the proponents. Mr. Howard.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. As mentioned, my name is Chuck Howard. I'm the state prosecutor for the Maryland Office of State Prosecutor, and I'm here today to express our office's support for the amended version of Senate Bill 922, which would eliminate, as Mr. Hook said, the provisions as they relate to subpoena power, coordination with law enforcement, and mandatory state agency reporting, but leave the very important provisions about creating and publicizing the hotline for the Office of Legislative Audits and directing its use. I'd like to thank Senator Lamb and his staff and Mr. Hook and his staff for working so hard with our office to make this legislation the best combination of enhancing audit accountability while also preserving the very important role of independence and confidentiality of ongoing criminal investigations. As I'm sure members of the committee are aware, the Office of State Prosecutor is an independent agency within the executive branch of government, and our specific mission is ensuring the honesty and integrity of state government and elections, as well as local and municipal government and elections, by conducting thorough independent investigations and, where appropriate, prosecutions of conduct that it could affect the integrity of government institutions, officials, employees, and elections. That mission parallels very closely with OLA, and we have traditionally considered OLA one of our most valued partners in our efforts. And I want to do nothing to restrain the referral of more issues and concerns to OLA, because they're a great source for us of avenues that we need to pursue to ensure that our state is free of corruption and misconduct. The bill, unfortunately, as Mr. Hook mentioned, is originally drafted, would have allowed the Office of Legislative Audits to compel documents and witnesses in ongoing criminal investigations conducted by all law enforcement and prosecutorial entities in the state, including our office. While we value the work of OLA, as mentioned, the legislation would create serious challenges to us to pursue ongoing criminal investigations, undermine our efforts to hold individuals accountable for corruption and misconduct, and also, and equally as importantly, protecting the rights of those individuals while they're undergoing the criminal investigative process. That said, as indicated in this version of the bill, we, along with the Office of the Attorney General, will be working with the Office of Legislative Audits to create best practices and craft an even closer working relationship. We've already made some initial commitments to be more transparent in the reporting from my office to LLA, and I've committed to provide a final copy of every investigative report after an investigation is concluded that involves the state government and processes for OLA's use to pursue whether additional audits or investigations, or to fashion recommendations for best business practices to go back to the state government and improve its process. I will mention, though, that the Office of Legislative Audits in the audit function has a very different mission than a law enforcement agency in a criminal investigation. And there are different rights attendant upon individuals that are implicated in this, and different authorities for obtaining records and documents pursuant to those investigations. That's why most agencies that have both missions, such as the Internal Revenue Service, bifurcate and do their best to separate and preserve separate chains of communication and separate authorities within their audit function and the criminal investigation function. I think, and in the future, partnering with OLA and with the Attorney General's criminal division, we can fashion a similar modality that will allow OLA to play a much greater role in investigations of financial crime and corruption in the state, and also enhance their basic audit function to surface irregularities and misuse of state funds and resources. We look forward to continuing this important discussion with OLA, and we're certainly available for continued communication with Senator Lamb and the committee on this legislation to address any remaining issues, and I'm certainly available for any questions. Thank you for the honor of speaking with you.
Thank you, Mr. Howard. Mr. McWilliams, are you there to answer questions, or would you like to take a couple minutes to testify?
I'm just here to answer questions. Thank you.
Okay. Then Office of OLA has plenty of people here to answer questions. Obviously, Senator Lamb has been ingrained with this as co-chair of the Joint Audits Committee. So the floor is open for questions. There is no one signed up in opposition. Let's start with Senator Ellis.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for your hard work, Senator Dr. Lyon. In my area of the world, audits, CPA work. I have a question for the prosecutor. I'm not sure, are you in support of this bill, or are you not in favor of it, or are you in support of the amendment? I'm not sure of your position. Could you rerun that for me, please?
Well, thank you, Senator. If I was at all confusing, I appreciate an opportunity to clarify that we are very much in support of this bill with the amendments. If you include the amendments, we believe the hotline, as Mr. Hook talked about, and the provisions addressing its use and the reporting are very valuable, and we support that completely. Well, we had problems with were the other provisions of the bill, but the amendments have taken care of those issues, 99% of those issues, and we're still tweaking a little bit of the language, but even if that's unsuccessful, I would still give you my support to the bill as amended.
Yeah. So those amendments, are they submitted by your officer, or?
I believe they were sponsors amendments.
The sponsor amendment.
Yeah, I think we have the amendments, or we're working on them.
Okay. All right, great. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Ellis. Let's go to Senator Carrozza.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Senator Lamb. I know this was an incredible amount of work to coordinate with all the various offices involved. And I just want to maybe more clarify, because my file might be limited of what I reviewed so far. What I was looking at in the testimony were the amendments from the Office of the Attorney General in their testimony. And then I had a testimony from the Office of the State Prosecutor, but it looks like I didn't see any amendments. And then you mentioned sponsor amendments. So I guess my question is just to know what amendments we're dealing with. And two, and you always do this so well, Senator Lamb, can you bottom line it for us with the amendments, what the bill actually does at this point?
So yes, and I think Greg can also speak to the intent and the amendments too. But what the bottom line that the bill does is require the departments to post the information about the hotline in flyers and on their website. That's the intent of the bill, you know, I think that was what came forward to us as the co-chairs of the Joint Committee on Audits and Evaluations. There were some amendments to address the authorities that were granted to a lot of the stakeholders that you cited there, and I think we've worked most of those out. But Mr. Hook, do you want to speak to those amendments? Because I know there were you know, some questions about expanded authority there.
Yeah, we had the amendment removes 3 provisions that really gave us unintended authority that we did not want. And one of those dealt with subpoena power, which it was probably crafted. It was crafted through another state auditor with their subpoena authority, but the language wasn't really technically the way it should have been done in Maryland, and it granted us too much unilateral authority. So that's one of the things that the criminal division and the state prosecutor were concerned about. And I agree, that was not our intent. So what remains once the sponsor amendments taken into account, and I will say, if you have amendments from the criminal division in front of you and the state prosecutor, those should be very similar to the sponsor amendment, because we've actually met with representatives of both those offices in crafting the sponsor amendment. So they should all be very close, if not identical. I can't say for sure, but they should be very close. But what remains is the notification of the existence of the fraud hotline, either through posters or website or email blasts to employees periodically. And then also what remains is codifying certain operating procedures we have for the hotline. Right now, our hotline, we have a hotline manual, which is confidential and which was reviewed by legal counsel to the General Assembly a number of years ago. But we want to take certain things in there and put them actually in code to give us certain authorities in statute to do certain things. Joe could get much more technical about it, but that's the bottom line.
That's helpful. Thank you.
That concludes the hearing. Senator Ellis, you have a question.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman, for your indulgence. Mr. Hook just mentioned something and took me for a loop. Did you say the hotline manual is confidential? And could you tell me why that's confidential?
There are certain processes and reporting things in that manual that we don't necessarily, and about how we would do our reviews, and we do not want we don't want anybody to know how we do our reviews of fraud referrals and how we treat them. And the Attorney General at the time, I don't know if I can name names, she's no longer one of the legal counsel of the General Assembly, but she concurred with it remaining confidential, and she did approve it, though. We had to review it for legal sufficiency, so to speak. But there are processes in there that we don't want people to know how we conduct our fraud investigations.
Okay. So when you say a hotline, you're talking about when people call up a fraud, waste, and abuse telephone number. Is that, am I reading that correctly?
If I would encourage everybody on the committee, if they would like to go to our website, because we have a tab on our website for the hotline. The hotline is a toll-free number, or it's a web referral, which is completely confidential if you want to remain confidential, or you can submit, and no one does this anymore, but a paper. We do, I think in the old days, we get an envelope and a big packet once in a while anonymously, but most of the referrals, I believe, come in now through the web, through our website.
Great, thank you.
Okay, that concludes the hearing on Senator Land's bill. Thank you, all the witnesses and testifiers. Committee, we're ending in a reasonable hour for a change, which is nice. The tentative schedule for the week is Wednesday voting after hearing. And I've asked you to put aside Friday morning, 9:45. So hopefully we can get 2 hours in. Friday, there may be a second session, and I know a number of people will be getting their second vaccine shot. If we can squeeze another hour or two later in the day without keeping you too late, we will. We pushed back 8 bills from last week, and we have more bills coming. So we want to get moving so people are not frustrated that their bills are not getting a fair shot at a voting session. So keep Friday open. You may get a request for a subcommittee or a work group meeting. We're going to keep our schedules flexible and be ready to be nimble and agile for the coming period of time. With that, ladies and gentlemen, committee members, we're adjourned. It looks like it's pretty outside. Get some fresh air.